Hello and welcome to an extra special, incredible Sri's Sunday New York Times read along. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host of the show. I'll be hosting today's show. And our very special guest is Tina Jordan, the deputy editor of the New York Times Book Review. Now, anytime we would have an opportunity to have Tina on the show would be special. But today is extra, super, triple, mega special, as my daughter would say, because it's the 125th anniversary of the New York Times Book Review. And she led the effort to celebrate this year-round, culminating in a special section in today's paper. So she'll walk us through that history, the background, how the section came together, and we are so thrilled to have you join us today. As I said, my name is Neil Parekh. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're also live on our Digimentors website and on my Facebook page. So thank you everyone for joining us. As I mentioned, we are thrilled to have Tina here. We're going to spend most of our time today on the book review. There is so much content to cover. We'll do a cursory glance at the front page sections, of course, but we want to spend as much time on the book review as possible and get to Tina as quickly as we can. First, as we do at the beginning of our shows, we want to welcome all of our viewers. Miriam Berkeley is watching from Hell's Kitchen in New York City. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us. Love your puddle reflections pictures that I've seen on Facebook. If you're friends with Miriam, or Miriam, I don't know if you put these on Twitter, but people should check them out because they're really great. Some really great pictures that you put up. Jonathan Borstein from the East Village. Jonathan, thank you as always for joining us. It's always great to have you. Doug Levy, waking up early as always in Northern California. It's 5:30 a.m. Eastern Pacific time for him. So all the folks who are complaining about this 8:30 start time, follow Doug's lead. He's great. Thank you so much, Doug. You're part of our West Coast crew that joins us early in the morning. As always, my mom. Hi, Mom. I think I talked to you this week. I can't remember. I think maybe not. But if not, this is your chance to see me. I look good. I'm healthy. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. But thank you, as always, Mom, for joining. I really do appreciate it. She's always watching. She has watched in a taxi cab on the way from the airport. She was getting up at 5:30 a.m. when she was in Seattle visiting my sister. She would watch in Singapore when it was dinner time, when she was visiting my sister there. Thank you, Mom, as always. Therese Steiner, not far from my mom in Yonkers. Bonjour, Therese. Thank you so much. Therese is on the board of Justice Aid and asked me to join the board as well. There was a great concert last week, Mavis Staples. Justice Aid does some incredible work. Please check them out, justiceaid.org, justiceaid.org. Thank you again, Therese. Diane Stefani joining from Margate, New Jersey, she's somewhere in Pennsylvania, tuning in briefly. Thank you, Diane, as always. And we have Carla Barnakis, one of our producers, joining from New Jersey, home of the author Harlan Coben. So thank you, Carla. Harlan was a guest on our show last year. Hala. ازيك يا هلا؟ عامل ايه؟ أخبارك ايه? Hala is our good friend from Egypt who just moved to Chicago and is watching. Thank you so much, Hala. I hope you're doing well. And so sorry about Jose. Jose is one of her 4 cats that she brought from Egypt. And unfortunately, he passed away this last week. But Hala, thank you so much for joining. Sunny Slaughter, it was good to see you at that concert this week. Another great friend and great supporter of the read along. She was our guest on a very special 1619 project edition that we did, focusing solely, similar to what we're going to do today. We focused entirely on the 1619 project when it came out almost 2 years ago. Patricia Freudenberg is watching on LinkedIn. Patricia, thank you very much for your support and always watching the show. Naomi Service watching from the Upper West Side. Thank you, Naomi. Linda Lawrence watching from Long Island. And my friend Jess Ash watching from Portland, Maine. Jess is a former United Way colleague. I know she's been looking forward to this show for the last 2 weeks since we announced it. And Patricia is starting off with the 125th anniversary greetings. Again, this is the 125th anniversary of the New York Times Book Review, and we have the deputy editor joining us to go over the special section and answer other questions about it. So thank you, Tina. Hala is clarifying it's the first time she's watching from Chicago. Ron Thomas checking in from Dubai, another former guest. Ron, thank you so much. And there, Therese sharing the link to justiceaid.org. Paula Kiger is our one of our other producers. She'll be sharing links in Facebook, in LinkedIn, to help provide context and guide you through the show. So we have a number of people watching. Thank you, everyone, for checking in. We'll get back to our greetings in just a bit. But what I want to do is to first thank our team. We wouldn't be able to do this without our incredible production team. Sri, of course, is the host. I am the executive producer and occasional guest host when Sri is not available. Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Barnakas round out our production team. We wouldn't be able to put on a show like this without them getting great guests, putting in links, etc. So thank you very much. And they are all part of our firm Digimentors, a social and digital consulting firm focusing on hybrid and virtual events. I'm the vice president of events and communications for Digimentors, and we put on conferences, webinars, trainings, whatever you need. If you're interested in having us produce a show like this for you, please feel free to reach out, Sri@digimentors.group or Neil@digimentors.group. We would love to work with you. I've been working full-time with Digimentors for about a year and almost 2 months now, since previous August, and it's been an incredible ride. So thank you, everyone, for your support. I also want to make sure that we thank our sponsor, Muckrack. Muckrack does incredible work. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Sri@digimentors.group, or me, Neil@digimentors.group. And we want to thank Muckrack for their longtime support of the New York Times read-along. We really do appreciate everyone watching, all the regulars that tune in on a weekly basis, but also the new people that might come in for a particular show or for particular topics. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Now what we'd like to do is to jump into the paper. So I can give you just a cursory glance at the front page sections, and then we will move on to Tina Jordan. Again, Tina Jordan is going to be our guest in just a bit. She is the deputy editor of the New York Times Book Review, and we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of the book review today. But before we do that, let's check out the front pages of the various sections of the paper. Here we have the very front page. That's Eric Adams on the in the display photo, and he's a mayoral candidate, the Democratic nominee. Fairly likely he will win, given New York's politics. The lead is Biden finds even victory has its cost, the consequences of political compromise. Here's that story about Eric Adams. Misinformation tripped alarms inside Facebook. Several stories about Facebook coming out, particularly what they did with WhatsApp and Facebook in India, and how it was used to foment riots and hatred. So you'll want to check that out as well. There's a article. She's a pioneer in space. China sent cosmetics. A Chinese astronaut, a woman who's obviously dealing with gender issues there. Racism protests changed the script on Broadway. The interesting article about how the shows in mid-run, Hamilton, The Book of Mormon, and a few others, are thinking, and The Lion King even, are changing their show to respond to concerns about not necessarily racism, but how people of color are portrayed on the stage. And then there's a vetting flagged dozens fleeing rule of Taliban. And you can see in the bottom right corner, and oh, I didn't flip it over. Here it is, the bottom half. There's that theater piece. And in the bottom right corner, you can see a little promo for the 125th, which we'll certainly get to in just a bit. The Sunday Review, Finding a Village, Can Co-Housing Ease the Burdens of Parenting? That's the main story, and you'll see the graphic actually goes the full length of the page. So you can see the top half and just a little bit of the bottom half as well. We're using this new camera called Pencil Cam, which is really great, provides a steadier hand in the overhead camera, but in terms of the width, the depth of the paper, you only see the top half, which is a little bit challenging, but we'll work through it. The Sunday Business, the real-life secession drama at Scholastic. The storied children's publisher had been a family empire until the bosses will surprise everyone. And to get ahead at work, it helps to actually be at work. That's a very, this is particularly for lawyers, I believe, but it's a challenging time with the return to work and COVID. So we'll see how that pans out. Sunday Styles, here's a really interesting story. It's about Amanda Knox. If you're not familiar, Amanda Knox was actually a University of Washington student. I used to live in Seattle for 15 years. She was in Italy on a exchange program, and she was accused with, I think it was her boyfriend, of murdering a roommate, and she was exonerated, but reviled, incarcerated in Italy, and eventually exonerated. Following years of international infamy, she is still trying to tell her story on her own terms. So that's a very interesting story there. You can see her, that picture is of her holding her baby, which is a really great, tender photograph. Fine Arts and Exhibits. This is a special section on fine arts, futures at work, and Art Envisions Tomorrow. As the world faces challenges that threaten its very existence, art institutions deepen their role in connecting audiences to the best possibilities for the future. Arts and Leisure, Hocus Pocus. What is this? This is The Wizard of Oddities. Ricky Jay's vast collection of memorabilia celebrating illusionists, card sharps, charlatans, and human cannonballs is going to auction. So that's the Arts and Leisure section. The New York Times Magazine, we're not going to have time to go into it, but it has a very interesting piece about sharks hitting Cape Cod's beaches. What will it take to keep people safe? So if you're curious about that, you definitely will want to check that out. And now, the pièce de résistance, the New York Times Book Review, 125 years of the book review. A perfect time to bring on our guest, Tina Jordan. As I mentioned earlier, Tina is the deputy editor of the New York Times Book Review, and she's joining us as the New York Times is celebrating 125 years of reviewing books. With that, we'll bring on Tina Jordan. Tina, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled. I'll talk your ear off about the history of the book review.
Please do. We have all day, so we can cover all the history that you went through, all the archive work you do. Of course, we're not going to go all day, but we almost could. I mean, there's so much information, so much content, and you've been working on this all year, right? When did you start planning for the 125th?
I'd say we started planning 2.5 years ago. I joined the Times, it'll be 4 years in January. And actually where they seated me in the books department was right next to a set of rolling shelves that housed all of our back issues, big bound copies. And this was a mistake on their part because soon I just lost myself in those. And it wasn't long before I realized, hey, we're about to have a big anniversary. And as you might imagine, like, we went through, I don't know, a dozen different plans more as we tried to figure this out. There's just so much material. It was hard to figure out the best ways to distill it.
I'm sure. I mean, there was just so much so much information to cover and to work through that. Now, one of the interesting things I want to note is that you started working on this 2.5 years ago, and then about a year and a half ago, so maybe a year into your process, we had this little thing called coronavirus, kind of interrupt our lives. Before we talked specifically about the planning process, just wanted to check in. How has the last year and a half been for you personally with COVID? We ask all our guests this question. We sincerely hope that you've enjoyed good health, that your friends and family have been okay. But what has the last year and a half been like outside of the 125th?
I think like a lot of folks, it's been a little bit challenging. I find that I work really well at home. I'm very efficient. I get a lot done. But the truth is that my colleagues on the books desk at the Times are just great folks. And the rapport, the camaraderie, the back and forth every day, even though we're working very hard, just being immersed in daily conversation about books, I miss that. And that to me has been the hardest part of working from home. We're going to be lucky enough to go back on a hybrid schedule, which I'm really going to like. I do have a long commute, but I'm sort of waiting impatiently for the day when they tell us we can plan to go back, because I can't wait to see my coworkers again.
I'm sure. We should check in. We have several people who have joined us to watch the show. We have Naktahar Singh saying, hey, thank you on LinkedIn. Ellen Austin joining from the Upper East Side. Hello, Ellen. We have Emily Silverman joining us from Philadelphia. Emily, always great to have you. Let's see, who else do we have now? Therese Steiner was saying she couldn't wait for us for the show. She gets the New York Times delivered and somehow did not get the book review.
Call and complain.
Absolutely. I mean, of all days to not get the book review, you definitely will want the print copy. There's a lot of great material online, but as we'll get to it, Tina, there are some pieces that are only in the print section. So, Therese, you want to make sure you call, see if you can get that. Great. Lippy Roy is joining us from New York City. Lippy, another former guest and a contributor to MSNBC and Forbes. She's a physician. She's been offering her commentary and analysis on COVID-19. So thank you, Lippy. Chitachi Egwu joining us from Fort Lauderdale. Chitachi, another former guest. Thank you so much for jumping in. Really appreciate it. Let's see who else we have. So great people joining. So Tina, in terms of the book review, what was it like to plan the issue during coronavirus? I mean, professionally, to try and figure this out, did it change anything that you were planning on doing? Did you have any grand plans that would have required in-person events or coordination? How did that evolve?
It was complicated. We had hired a fellow on the books desk for a year to help us with this project. And she started 2 months after we started working from home. She never got to work in the office. I worked only remotely with her. The archives are all available online, the Times archives. So we had that. I will say I missed being able to sit down and page through those bound volumes, because to me it was harder to find, the little serendipitous items that you would see, lodged at the bottom of a page from 1898, for example. It's harder to flip through an issue when you're doing it digitally. I also had very much wanted to be able to go in person to the New York Public Library, which houses the New York Times archives. We were not able to do that, but I will say the librarians there were enormously helpful and, scanned and sent PDFs of I don't know how many files that related to the book review for us.
That's great. And so, as we dig into the book review, again, you started earlier this year with posting content online and doing some special pieces in the paper as you went. What I'd like to do is actually start with the print edition and then work our way backwards and pick up some of the earlier pieces. There are some incredible pieces that you've put together online, but I want to share the print edition with folks who may not get the paper at home. For folks in California, they don't get the paper for another couple hours. They watch our show to see what they should pay attention to. So if you can walk us through this very special section, we'd really appreciate it. I'll bring it up online, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
So let's check that out, and we'll put that in the front. So let's start with the cover. 125, obviously, 2 fonts that you used right off the bat. How did you get to this cover in terms of the design?
We have a pretty brilliant art director named Matt Dorfman who thought very early on, and we agreed that the best way to approach this was with a text-only cover. And one of the things that we wanted to do was with this cover was evoke the book review's history, but at the same time, give a nod towards what it is now. So this font that you see on the top is like very close to an old font that was used in the book review. So what we're trying to convey here is the old to the new. And I think it works. I think it's a genius cover.
The old to the new, is that the font that was used? A particular font, or is it just an older font?
It's very close, and the little curly cues and squiggles, as you'll see when we get to the pages that showcase old covers of the book review, things like that you see in a lot of late 19th, early 20th century book reviews. So it's very accurate.
Interesting. So let's take a look at the inside. Certainly the 125. Now, just one thing to clarify in terms of the content for this week's issue. All of it is 125, or do you have other content as well? Because I know on the website you had some recent content this week, right? That was just standard book review content.
Right. This entire issue is archival.
That's great. That is just great. So we have the fiction and poetry, nonfiction. You're continuing the table of contents over here. Usually you don't have to do that.
Right.
Children's books and features. And these are all archival stories, older reviews, older essays, older interviews with various folks. It's about 50 pieces that you have in the issue?
I think that's about right.
How did you get down to 50?
So I have to backtrack a little because there's also a book coming out to celebrate the anniversary. And when I began collecting possible pieces for the book, I had a manuscript that basically the publisher said, sorry, this would be 1,000-page book. We're going to have to pare this down. We can use 1/5 of this material. So I had already highlighted a lot of pieces that I wanted to use. And to be very clear, there is only one piece in this special standalone issue that's also in the book. So there's only one duplicate. We had so much material. The challenge was not finding material. It was putting things on the cutting board. That was tough for me. This issue could have been 2 pages right here. I would have been happy.
And it's a good thing you have the book to have some of that extra content. And we'll certainly get to the book in a little bit. So let's take a look at what we have from the very front, from the editors. This first piece is your introductory essay. This is 125 years of the piece. Now, you wrote this, I believe. It's adapted from the forthcoming book that you wrote with Noor, Qasim.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So that's great. Not only you have 105 years of letters, so you actually have almost like a letters page but it's the old letters that you brought in.
Correct.
Penguin Random House obviously has a nice ad congratulating the Times on the 125 years. They're also the publisher of your new book that's coming out November 2nd.
Let me tell you something quickly about the letters, which I found fascinating.
Please.
The letters pages might have been my favorite parts of the early book review. People started sending in letters almost right away, and they sort of became the internet message board of the day. There were these lively, bristly, intelligent letters like arguing with reviews, arguing with one another, asking for recommendations. People would write in and say, here's my list of the best, 25 short stories of the last 50 years. What's your list? And other people would write in. And it was fascinating. When controversial books got published, the letters would go on for months without stopping as people argued with one another. So the letters are were really a fun thing for me.
That's great. Is there any one in particular that stands out to you? I mean, you have letters from E.I. Fraser and Jack London, the Jack London, I assume.
It's the Jack London, and he's doing that thing which writers really shouldn't do, which is to write in and complain about a review.
Complain, but
right?
But I assume that they do, and that it's somewhat regular, right? Pearl Buck.
Yes, I think my favorite letters, if I had to choose a group of letters, I would choose the letters that came in after the publication of House of Mirth, which was, of course, Edith Wharton's skewering of high New York society. And, there were people who found it libelous. There were people who loved it. The letters literally went on for 6 months. And it's immensely enjoyable just to string them together and read them straight through.
And that's Edith Wharton. That's when you the first time you put a photograph on the cover of the book review, right?
That's right. That was 1905, and photos were, of course, regularly appearing in other parts of the paper by that point. I don't know enough about Times history to know how the use of photos came about in different sections, but Edith Wharton definitely was the first author, and that was 1905.
That's great. I want to give a quick word of kudos from my friend Jess. You're great on Twitter. You can follow Tina Jordan on Twitter, Tina Jordan NYT. That's Tina Jordan NYT. And I want to point out also the hashtag that we have at the top of the screen, NYTBR 125. That's New York Times Book Review 125. So feel free to tweet using that and to mention Tina Jordan. So thank you, Jess. Let's see what else. And Jess was commenting your letters as a modern day message board. She liked that. Laura Silverman, watching from Philadelphia, loves Edith Wharton. So glad to hear she elicited such strong reactions. And Emily also. Thanks for she's thanking and I want clarification on the relationship before I say anything. But Emily, thank you for your comment. Miriam said she had the first color photo on the cover of the book review. It was of Willie Morris, early 90s. So that's an interesting tidbit as well. So let's continue on. And we always pay attention to the ads in the paper, and it's great to see, obviously W.W. Norton and Macmillan Publishers congratulating the New York Times on the 125th anniversary. Now, the very first review that you reprinted here is by Vladimir Nabokov of Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. Now, I can't say that I've read Nausea, much less the original French or the translation, but Mr. Nabokov had some choice words for both the translator and the author in there.
He did. In fact, he wasn't really sure it was worth translating at all.
And you didn't like the translation itself.
And he didn't like
right?
the translation. And I should point out that this is, of course, before Nabokov, became famous, really.
It was. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things to me is looking back at all the writers who became famous and won Nobels and won Pulitzers and won National Book Awards and became word of mouth names. A lot of them reviewed for us before, and in some cases after that happened. It's fascinating to see.
Was it intentional that was the first review in the layout? Did you want to set a tone with that?
I don't think it was intentional in that sense. As you'll see as we page through this, it's not chronological. Now, my editor's brain had to grapple with that at first. Like, I always feel like there needs to be an order to something. But our art directors who worked on this issue were very persuasive and said, look, you want to mix this up. You don't want to have somebody say, oh God, the 20s and 30s. I don't want to read about those, And they were right. Like when you don't know what's coming next, you want to keep turning the pages, right? And I will say, so to be perfectly frank with you, so we're hemmed in a little bit by ads, right? Like,
of course,
up front. So to some extent, this space was dictated by ads, and we needed a review of this length here, if that makes sense.
Got it. So it's a space that it's a puzzle that you're putting together in terms of the layout.
It's a puzzle. It comes together at the last minute, and it's really stressful. That our ad team, they're great. They were selling ads up until the last minute. And so we were sort of moving things frantically around.
Sure. Emily clarified that she and Laura are sisters. So I'm thankful that I asked the question. And Naomi said reading Nausea in 9th grade introduced her to existential angst. Thank you, Naomi. So we will go on. So the next piece is, now here is a nice 2-page spread. You have Willa Cather, Colson Whitehead, James Joyce's Ulysses, of course, and Weather by Claudia Rankine. Now, what stands out when you see all 4 of these together, and you also have them online, are the illustrations, the graphics that you had with these stories. Can you tell us about the graphic design work and the illustrations that went with these stories?
Again, this is a brainchild of Matt Dorfman, our art director, when we were considering how this should look. First, we looked back at the issue that celebrated the 100th anniversary, and the book review was only in black and white at that point. They had the same illustrator illustrate each person. We knew we didn't want that. We looked at old photos, and that there are not great old photos of all these people. And it also felt a little bit fusty. And I feel like our goal here was to present this fabulous old content, but to have it look a little fresh and modern. And our art director hit on the idea of assigning every single illustration to a different person and just letting them run with it, not giving them direction, not giving them color direction or anything like that, just to see what we got. And I have to say, I think that was a genius move. I mean, look at these. They're amazing.
They are. I'll even flip through. We'll jump ahead a little bit just to look at the illustrations. There's Elizabeth Gilbert, Sandra Cisneros,
that's
Toni Morrison.
Which one? Toni
Morrison. Why is that?
The art director sent me a sketch at one point, and he said, he told me the artist is working with just colored pencils, and she claims she's never used colored pencils before. And it's just such a beautiful portrait. I mean, I can't take my eyes off that one.
And we have Miriam saying beautiful layout of diverse illustrations accompanying the reviews. Laura Silverman, such a great idea using multiple illustrators and letting them run with it. Chitachi also saying the illustrations are superb. So Matt Dorfin and also Mary Jane, I'm blanking on her last name.
Yes, I am too, and that's why I haven't said her name, and I feel terrible about that. But yes,
no problem at all. We can fix that right away. Some quick Mary Jane Callister
yes,
is who it was.
Callister. She works on a lot of these kinds of projects at the Times, and she's great with text, you know, with fonts and text, and she really had a vision for this issue.
Great.
And, you know, this looks very different than the book review usually looks.
Absolutely.
But you know, we don't have headlines. We've just got, you know, the big author and title. So it's a very simple, plain, fresh, modern layout, but it really does, it really, you know, you've got these portraits. It evokes it evokes these old reviews. I just love it. It's not fusty at all.
And Terry Smith, who was our guest last week on the New York Times Read Along, is watching from Annapolis, Maryland. Great guest. Terry just came out with his memoirs last week, and you know, was a longtime New York Times correspondent, foreign correspondent. Went on to work at CBS News and the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Terry, thank you so much for watching today, and we will keep moving on. I wanted to show some of the other illustrations as well, just to give people a sense. Here's a illustration of Doris Lessing, but we also have one of Meg Wolitzer. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I want to pause here and talk about this piece. This was reprinted from 2012, and it is a piece that's called The Second Shelf, which is an interesting play on the second sex, about how women are given short shrift when it comes to everything from book promotion to reviews to support within the publishing industry. With that, you know, briefest of thumbnail sketches, Tina, can you speak to, you know, where you think we are today, 9 years later? What do you think? I mean, clearly, in terms of the book review, with you and Pamela at the helm, women are playing Pamela Paul as the editor. You have a leadership role in the book review. But how much progress have we made in the last 9 years?
You know, I think Meg Wolitzer sparked a conversation that's still ongoing. One of the reasons I love working for Pamela is that she doesn't come, you know, to assignments with, you know, entrenched ideas about what should be reviewed. And if you look at like our history under Pamela, women are reviewed as often as men. They are reviewers as often as men are. But I think this essay by Meg Wolitzer, which is a very thoughtful essay, basically saying, look, if a woman had written the corrections, you know, it would have been filed in the women's fiction section, right?
Yeah.
It definitely sparked a conversation. I still think there is some of that. There are some female writers who I think are still given short shrift today because they write, quote, family novels, unquote.
Family novels.
Family novels. You know, I'm thinking of people like Jodi Picoult or, you know, Jennifer Weiner, people whose novels sometimes straddle that commercial literary fiction line on the side of commercial, but they, you know, I don't think they're reviewed in the same way they would be if they were men.
And I'm coming on camera just to take for a moment. You know, our friend Jess Ash, who's watching, has done a series of analyses of the New Yorker magazine, looking at you know, how many authors are women, the covers, etc., and has worked with Gender Avenger to do that. And Gender Avenger also does this thing where, like, in meetings, you can track how many times do men speak, how much time do women get. within a meeting. It'd be interesting, particularly with that change. I mean, this would be more the historical look. When you're doing it over time, you can see that that growth and that change. But I can't tell you how thrilled I am to hear that. And it's always great to see women in leadership roles. It really does make a difference in terms of what gets covered, who gets assigned, et cetera. So thank you for sharing that insight. I want to jump ahead a little bit just because it's topical. Parul Sehgal did an analysis of the book review going back over several years. I want to see if we can pull that up real quick. This was in your the content that you had over the last the year, looking at the book review. Right.
And it's also, yes, and it's also in the book.
It's also in the book that you have as well. Absolutely. So as I look for that, can you tell me a little bit about, here it is, reviewing the book review is the piece that she wrote, and I'll share that on the screen for folks. One moment. There we go. There we go. So there's the piece. And I really, what stood out for me in terms of the piece that she wrote was a particular quote as I dug into it, scrolling down. So she did a textual analysis of the review over time. And then where is the piece? I think it's coming down. Right here. And yet, in recent years, the Times has faced scrutiny of the racial and gender imbalance in its reviews. One survey, which looked at nearly 750 books assessed by the Times in 2011, found that nearly 90% of the authors assessed were white. But what about the reviews themselves, the language, the criteria? When women, people of color, LGBTQ writers were reviewed, how was their work positioned? What patterns can we trace? What consequences? And so, the thought that I have on reading that, first of all, giving that assignment to Parul, which was great, former editor of the book review, takes a certain amount of self-awareness and openness to say, yeah, sure, we may not be perfect. Our history may not be, as great as we want it to be, but we want to take a look. We want to dig into what our past was and learn from it, similar to what the obituaries desk is doing with the Overlook series,
right? Acknowledging
that in the past they have not done obituaries for people of color, for women who deserve them. Were you there for some of this review, some of this thinking with Parul's work? How is that received internally?
I think it was received very well. And I was adamant from the beginning of this project, that if we were going to shine this spotlight on the book review, we needed to really look at it. And, there's a few reviews in here that today we would not run, that I think are problematic and sexist. It can't just be a celebration of everything we did right. It's critical that we come to this anniversary and look at our failings as well as our successes. I feel that very strongly. I don't think it would be honest to celebrate this anniversary and pretend that everything was always great, and that has been in the back of my mind since I started this. And, that's what the book includes, problematic pieces. This issue does. I think, we need to be aware of what our history is, honestly.
That's great and really refreshing. I think that, the approach to the Times is similar to, our work with the New York Times. We're obviously the New York Times read-along, the work Sri has been doing. This is we're actually celebrating our 6th anniversary doing this show. I'm not sure I'll be around for the 125th anniversary of the read along, but hopefully it'll still be going. But we can take that position. We obviously love the New York Times. We love the print edition. We celebrate the print edition. But it also helps to be able to be critical when necessary. To be able to, when you care for something so deeply, you can also be critical of that, and it's great to see that from the paper as well.
Absolutely. And I love the Times. I obviously I love the book review, but I wanted to look at it. It's 125-year span with open eyes. And
Sure.
Having Parl write this essay was a way to sort of do a bird's eye view of what has happened over the decades.
Sure.
I think this essay is amazing, and I think she did a great job with it.
I want to recognize Sherry Burrell joining us from Beverly Hills. Thank you, Sherry, watching on LinkedIn. And we also have Lippy Roy making a comment in the same vein, women are sadly given short shrift in every field. Gender bias in medicine, she can personally speak to. Deborah Bernick, children's books deserve greater coverage. Important books sell well, and they're creative. And then I mentioned Jess Esch earlier in terms of her New Yorker gender tally. She shared a link in Facebook for that. You can see that, jessicaesch.com/TNY gender tally with hyphens, and also follow Gender Avenger. Eve Bathello is watching, saying good morning. Thank you. Patricia really is commenting on what you said just a moment ago. Transparency equals authenticity. I think that really is a great summary point. Being transparent about your history, acknowledges that you're self-aware and that you can move on, that you can be, honest about that. And just picking up on that, we need to be aware of what our history is. She's quoting you, saying that. Amen. Absolutely. Dr. Chandrasekhar, one of the hosts of She's on Call, which is a medical show that airs at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, says the same thing. Lippy is speaking the truth in terms of the impact of gender bias in medicine. So thank you very much, Tina. Really appreciate that. We'll go back to the paper, and we'll focus on the rest of the sections. There's the Golden Notebook, The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, Isabel Allende, the interview. So again, a reprinted interview from 1985.
What I'd like to say about the interviews is,
sure.
We don't run them in the book review any longer, and they used to be a staple. And I've included a fair number of them here because we often ran them right next to a review. And I actually liked that combination looking back, especially as I was reading about books I didn't know about or hadn't read. And so in a way, in some cases, the old interviews were more instructive than the reviews themselves, which, for example, there's a Ralph Ellison, interview in here that I think is just wonderful and that serves the reader much better than a review of the book would have in this issue.
You do a profile of authors in the book review at the first few pages. It's not an interview about the book. It's more of a questionnaire, right?
Right. It's a questionnaire about what kind of books they like to read.
Got it. So this piece, this interview with Isabella Allende is reprinted. And then you have this piece on the review of Roots by Alex Haley.
This is by James Baldwin, this review.
By James Baldwin.
And can I just read the kicker to it, which I think is fabulous?
Please do.
So we forget what a big deal Roots was when it came out, but he says, Roots is a study of continuities, of consequences, of how a people perpetuate themselves, how each generation helps to doom or to liberate the coming one. It suggests with great power how each of us, however unconsciously, can't but be the vehicle of the history which has produced us. well, we can perish in this vehicle, children, or we can move on up the road. I just think that's wonderful.
Absolutely. I think that, you're right. I think that it is hard for people to understand the importance of roots on our culture. Both the book, then obviously the TV series. My mom, if she hasn't commented yet, I see she may be cooking, but we watched that when I was very young, and I was fascinated by it. And apparently, I was running around the house yelling "Kunta Kinte." But it really did. I mean, you know, how many years? 30 years before the 1619 project, really did focus people's attention on slavery, and it really captivated a nation. It's almost. I mean, it's. I'd be curious, not having been old enough, to know how that was received, both the book and then the TV show as well, back in the 70s.
I mean, they were both huge deals. The book was a huge bestseller, and wasn't the show like one of the first miniseries of its kind like that?
I think so.
I'm not a TV historian, so I can't say that definitively, but I think that it was. I think that book was, very much part of the cultural conversation at that time.
And Naomi is saying roots have profound effect on her and her peers. If others have the book and the series, if others have recollections of the impact of roots, we'd certainly like to see that in the comments. Hala is saying that she watched it in Egypt, and Cairo streets were almost empty on the showtime every night, which is really interesting to hear, particularly because one, usually the only thing that would empty the streets in Cairo would be a soccer match between Ahly and Zamalek, the Yankees and Red Sox of Egyptian soccer. But more importantly, race has a very different construct in Egypt. Certainly, there are issues with people from Sudan, darker people, if you will. But it's such a different concept outside of the U.S. So to see that has that kind of impact abroad is really interesting. Sherry is saying to check with LeVar Burton and others regarding roots, and Paula is sharing a helpful link to the history of roots. So that's really great. And Hala is saying it was as empty as during a big soccer match, which is interesting. Jumping ahead, I don't know where it is in the book, but since Dr. Chandrasekhar brought it up, it wasn't until she read Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston and then Joy Luck Club, which we saw earlier, that I found any Western books that felt like they were truly about me, which is really interesting. And I'll say I was thankful that my 12th grade English teacher, Laura Rice, Mrs. Rice, thank you, an incredible teacher, incredible array of books she had us read. The Woman Warrior was one of those books. So again, a very important piece. So thank you for that. I'm looking there's also in between this root section and this piece by Jane Jacobs, this little by land, by sea, by air. And I don't remember seeing these little tidbits, 1913, 1936, 1947, 1951. You see, if you remember this piece, just the Super Dreadnought New York, the Navy's biggest ship, now within 5% of completion, is to be the first ship of the Navy. Do you know what these tidbits are?
So basically, I had pulled together a standard timeline, but you can imagine the difficulties of running a standard timeline across the bottom of all these pages when you don't know what your ad configuration is going to be. And so at some point I thought, what if I divided up these timelines into fun categories?
Oh, okay.
And so that's what I did. And these are not online. They just appear, sporadically throughout the issue. We didn't keep in mind that one of the big challenges was things ran at very different lengths over the years. And while some of these are trimmed, we regularly, for example, ran 300-word reviews. So I was looking for ways to fill some of that space with other interesting book coverage from both the book review and the newspaper itself. So,
and sorry about that.
So that, there's one on literary spats, for example.
Sure.
There's one on all the angry op-eds the book review ran in the years that the Pulitzer Committee decided not to award a fiction prize. They're just funny little bits.
I'm looking for, here's another one, early book review editorials. Heroines Who Smoke from 1900.
Yeah.
What the American heroine will do next to make herself profoundly disagreeable has become a vexed question. Books for lazy people, priggish heroines, and a celibate censorship, which is certainly interesting. You made a comment about 300-word reviews. Just for context, you said that we haven't always done 300-word reviews. Is that what you do now? Is that the standard?
We don't.
Is that a long review? What, like, for example, because you can see the length on these are very different. A full page for The Jeweler's Eye by William Buckley with a picture. A little bit of a column here for Ann Petry's The Street, from 1946. So where would 300 words fit in? Is that a short review, long review?
That's short. The Ann Petry is probably about 300 words.
Oh, okay.
The one pagers are about 1,200 words. That's basically that's what our longer reviews are now.
Okay.
But the shortest review we do these days is 600 words.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can see, like, this review of The Lost World is quite short.
Sure.
Conan Doyle. By the way, this is an embarrassment for me, but I didn't realize that Michael Crichton, when he wrote The Lost World, was riffing on a book that was already written by Arthur Conan Doyle about dinosaurs in modern society. This book, as I think I tried to do with all of the books in this issue, and in fact, in the book itself, I'm trying to include interviews with authors and reviews of books that were part of the conversation of the day, the books that people were talking about, if that makes sense. Arthur Conan Doyle was hugely popular in this country. And this book was an enormous deal when it came out.
And just put in, and I'm not sure which one she's referring to unless you know, the illustration by London Ladd is amazing. Do you know which one London Ladd did?
I didn't. I'm embarrassed to tell you. Maybe Jessica can tell.
Jess, please let us know which one you were referring to. No, I certainly wouldn't expect you to know all 50 illustrations and which ones each illustrator did. But Jess, if you can let us know, we definitely would go back to that. Patricia was saying that Roots was a life-changing series. My mom shared as well. Many people became aware of Black history because of that. Therese commenting on LeVar Burton, a lover of books. And Rose saying she also read Woman Warrior in high school. Rick Botello had a question he was posing. How can we use edutainment more effectively to address the deep root causes of racism? Do you have any thoughts on that, or what role? Is there a role for you to play within your sphere of influence in terms of what books you choose? On the bottom of the review of your the 125 years, if I'm not mistaken, there is a poem that you have, right, about the Black Lives Matter protests.
The Claudia Rankine poem?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to? Right. Look, this was at the beginning of the pandemic. This is shortly after the murder of George Floyd. At the book review, we were grappling with how do we address this moment in our culture, in our history. It felt not right just to do a regular book review. that week. And so we ended up going to two poets to write poems for us, which appeared on the cover. And I think that was an important thing for us to do. It was our way of saying, look, books, poetry, like the book at that point, of course, there weren't books addressing the moment, but it just felt so critical for us to say something about that moment, because having a regular book review, it would have seemed like we were ignoring what was going on, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And what I wanted to pull up, this is at the bottom of your piece online, Take a Journey Through 125 Years of Book Review History. This shows the very bottom back in, this is the Bob Dylan piece, but this is the cover image. And we could just take a moment to listen to Claudia Rankine and Jericho Brown read their poems.
Weather. On a scrap of paper in the archive is written, I have forgotten my umbrella. Turns out, in a pandemic, everyone, not just the philosopher, is without. We scramble in the drought of information, held back by inside traders, drop by drop, face covering. No, yes. Social distancing, 6 feet under for underlying conditions, black, just us, and the blues kneeling on a neck with the full weight of a man in blue. 8 minutes.
8 minutes. I cut that off. It's a 4-minute piece, but I wanted to give people just a quick snapshot of what that was like. Since we're looking at that piece, the Take a Journey Through 125 Years, this is the cover essay for, this is the cover essay for your piece, if I'm not mistaken, for the section?
You're looking, I'm sorry.
This piece that's online, which is the 125 years of the book review history.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show the online version, which I think was fascinating.
Look closely. Well, you can't look closely at that because it's so tiny on the screen. It's just fascinating because the first issue of the book review, the edict of the book review was to treat books as news. And so that top article on the top left, Booksellers in Conclave, what it's about is independent booksellers are frantic about how department stores are emerging as booksellers. And they're worried about it. So if that sounds familiar, that's been going on for a long time.
So this quick review, I like what you did online with this. Having it scroll up on October 10th, the Times published the first issue of the book review, 1896, as a Saturday book review supplement. 1905, we mentioned this earlier. Shortly before publication of The House of Mirth, this is the first photograph to appear on the cover of Edith Wharton. We have in 1918, to illustrate the 1,562 books, the book review used an infographic. And if you look closely, that's a stack of books. There are 321 books about war, 257 fiction books, etc. I was so fascinated by this, I actually recorded a video narrating these pieces just so folks could see it online. It's in the Twitter thread that I put together for the show. In 1964, Martin Luther King Jr.'s, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s fourth book appeared on the cover. The first cover book review in color was the 1993 summer reading issue. This in 2004, this iconic cover illustration by Milton Glaser featured Bob Dylan. And then in 2020, in a year of great change, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie reviewed former President Barack Obama's memoir of his first 4 years in office. And that, in addition to the summer, even the book review, 2004, layout. This is the current size and layout that we've come to know with the book review. So I thought that was fascinating, and that is the 125 years of the New York Times book review. That's just the intro to this piece. When you scroll down online, you have this opening essay, these pull quotes, incredible photography, the Titanic, just great, some old video footage from F. Scott Fitzgerald, Great Gatsby, Winnie the Pooh. Son 6 plans revenge poems on Milne when he grows up. Just fascinating. Idaho, a guide in word and picture. I mean, you got all these from the archives, right?
Right.
This book review, the 50th anniversary issue, and it just goes on. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, The Second Sex, James Baldwin, Notes for the Native Son, Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, video of James Baldwin, right? And on. Just fascinating. Toni Morrison, just scrolling all the way down to the bottom. Mark Twain, of course, and then that poem that we started with.
Right.
And certainly want to do a shout out to Rebecca Halleck, Marcel Hopkins, Amanda Webster, and Rumsey Taylor, who helped produce this specific piece. How many people were involved in putting not just the special edition together, which we'll get back to? We still have about half of the special edition to go to, but we're delving into the history. How many people were involved total in this enterprise?
Well, that's a good question. For the books desk, I'd say altogether you've got 20 to 25 people who've been spending some of their time on this year-long project. I've been spending all of my time.
Sure.
And I'm probably the only person who's spent all of my time doing it. But yes, like the rest of the books desk has pitched in. There's a section at the Times called Special Projects.
Sure.
And it's under Special Projects that the digital version of this has appeared. And that's a whole team that has pitched in, helping with photo research and interactive design and all of those good things.
Absolutely.
I came from 30 years of Time Inc. when I came to the Times, and I'm just sort of, it was such a pleasant surprise to come to a place where when you had a big idea, you could get help to make it happen.
Which is great.
Yeah.
It's just great. Jess had mentioned earlier that the illustration by London Ladd was amazing in her words. And she clarified that comment was for the Alex Haley review.
Yeah.
And that picture right here of Alex Haley, I'll put that back on the screen.
It really is beautiful. I mean, I said I liked the Toni Morrison illustration the best, but honestly, as I page through, I don't know. I feel like I want these portraits on my wall. And there's a few that I swear to you, the Edith Wharton would make a great tattoo. Not that I'm a tattoo person, but the Edith Wharton would be a fabulous tattoo.
It would be a great gallery show, right? To have all of these pieces up on the walls. That'd be really interesting. Jess also expressed surprise at the that Michael Crichton's Lost World was riffing on Arthur Conan Doyle. So thank you for sharing that with us.
So I'm not the only person who didn't know that.
No.
Yeah.
And
I'm stunned to read that, to figure that out.
Yeah. Laura Sullivan was saying it makes so much sense to use art to help us process horrific events. That's the poetry we shared earlier.
Right.
And Rose said that was so great to have them write poems
That's
that week.
Better way of expressing it than I said, but yes, to have a poet train their lens on great conflict that's roiling the country is a much different thing, obviously, than, reading a news report or even reading a book about it years later. And I think, I think it's critical to have. I just feel strongly about that.
Naomi says that Alex Haley wrote a magnificent biography of Malcolm X as well. And Sherry has a very interesting comment that in regards to African American slavery, what is obviously a part of the history, but it's a part. Let's also identify and talk about Black millionaires in the 30s and Black Wall Street, particularly Tulsa. Being a child of Black privilege, the history is not fully told. Absolutely, Sherry. There's not enough told. It's certainly not. I mean, it would be as wrong to only focus on slavery as it would be to only focus on half of the story of today. For any group of people, but particularly for the Black community. So thank you for making that point. Please.
I was going to say in another one of the online pieces called Literary Hangouts, we do focus on Black literary salons of the 20s and 30s, many of them in Sugar Hill. So we do train a lens on, wealthy Black New York in another piece.
Absolutely. Literary Hangouts is another great piece that is worth showing online. And that's another one that I did a little video capture of just because if people had not had a chance to see it, I wanted to make sure they did. I had put Anita's comment up. Rankine's poem so moved me when the New York Times Book Review published it that I taped it up on my door so I could lay eyes on it every day. So that's really impressive, just to understand the power of doing something like that. But let's take a look at the Literary Hangouts piece, because I think that was also fascinating. When writers gathered, gossiped, danced, and drank in New York. So even if we just pull that up and let that go, this is the main page, the landing page when you get to the story, and it just cycles through several of these hangouts. There used to be Algonquin, of course, and Cafe Loop, the Odeon. This is when you first get to the page, and then as you scroll down, again, incredible photography. Interesting that it's a white on black in terms of the layout, but right up about the Chelsea Hotel, and Patti Smith, William Burroughs, Arthur Miller, Simone de Beauvoir, White Horse Tavern. I mean, this is just, not being, I mean, I can't say that I'm familiar with this history or the hangouts of authors, but just from a visual aesthetic perspective, and this is just beautiful to see in terms of the way it's laid out. James Baldwin walking down the street here, Edgecombe Avenue, just great to see these.
It's always, anyone who lives in New York, knows that feeling of walking past a place that, has some kind of importance historically. You just, you feel to this day that you could walk down past the Algonquin and, just past what you're looking at, is
Sure.
Dorothy Parker, right? It's just that's one of the great things about living in New York.
Cafe Loop, it's a 2012 piece about this cozy West Village hangout. And then Fran Lebowitz, Gay Talese, Christopher Hitchens, Doctorow. Just great. And this goes on. I mean, this piece just fabulous.
It was a lot of fun to work on.
Tom Wolfe, absolutely. Just pull it all together, pull the photographs, the text, and kudos again to the team that put it online: Amanda Bowe, Aurora Colon, Antonio De Luca, Gabrielle Gianardoli, Rebecca Halleck, Ruru Kuo, William O'Donnell, and Jeff Roth. Apologies for the mispronunciations, but still, I want to make sure to give them credit where credit is due. Obviously, you won't be able to see that on the screen. It'd be too small. we are approaching the end of our show. It's 9:45. We still have some time with you, thankfully. And we've only gotten through halfway of the actual print version. We've covered several of the online features, which is great. Can you point out, except for the timeline that you pointed out earlier, are there any other Easter eggs in here that are print only that people wouldn't be able to find online?
No, I think everything else is online. I think it's these little extra timeline pieces that are missing.
Got it.
And also the print, I believe no, that's not right. Never mind.
That's okay. So we covered that, and then classic golden age crime stories. That was a whole piece that you had online. The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie, The Maltese Falcon, The Dutch Shoe Mystery, The Saltmarsh Murders. And these are short reviews, right? These are maybe even 100.
Correct.
150 words, maybe?
You know, one of the reasons we run regular genre columns every week now, which are collections of shorter reviews, crime, thrillers, romance, historical fiction, but crime novels have been covered in a regular column since the 1920s. And I just sort of, I wanted a genre column in here, and it made sense to have it be crime since that's the longest running one. And I just thought it might be more interesting if I plucked examples from crime novels over a period of 20 years or so, especially the first works of people who went on to be famous. I mean, look at this Agatha Christie review. Though this may be the first published book of Miss Agatha Christie, she betrays the cunning of an old hand. You know,
From 1920.
Yeah. So it's not meant to be, this page is not meant to be a definitive collection of like the best. It's just a sampling of reviews that I thought were interesting from that era.
And when we were talking about the artwork, Laura suggested selling flash tattoos of all these illustrations, donating the proceeds to pen.org. So that might be something to look into. Our friend Terry Smith had a question. Why no masthead on the book review? Has there ever been? And I'd have to look back at the front to see that there is no masthead, right?
There is no masthead, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. That's a good...
I do not know. I have never seen a masthead in any of the old book reviews I looked through.
Interesting. So let's see what else, any other comments I can get to. Jonathan Borstein saying crime novels have been reviewed for roughly a century. There's another theme issue just in that.
There really could be, let me tell you. There definitely could be.
Good. So let's see, what else do we have in print? My favorite. So I shared this on Twitter, books about Babe Ruth. I was thrilled to see this. Roger Angel in 1974, covering 4 different books about the Babe. And when I shared it, I tagged several of the sports writers that have been guests on this show, Bill Roden, George Vesey, John Branch, and most importantly, among such a hallowed group, Claire Smith, who I got to interview last year. But this was a nice touch. Thank you. This Yankee fan is much appreciative for his inclusion.
This is an amazing piece. I mean, he's just such a beautiful writer. I mean, again, if I can read the last line of something, he's talking about how every single person who saw the Babe hit a home run remembers that moment. But he says, now with everything on TV, and keep in mind, this is 1974, none of that makes a difference anymore. And he says, we no longer notice these kinds of things. He says, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. When Hank Aaron broke Ruth's record, he says, how many of us can still see it at this moment, and how many of us care? It simply went by, and another sports site took its place, and another and another. The games and the all-stars and the championships roll on without cease, and vaguely and irritably we long for something else, somebody or somebody who can stop it all for a minute and fix an image in our memory. What we get for our prayers is Evel Knievel. But no, never again, a guy like Ruth. It's just a beautiful piece.
Absolutely. I want to get through. Therese thanks us for the literary hangout this morning. So thank you, Therese. This is a piece by Ta-Nehisi Coates, rather. And again, by Junichiro Tanizaki. Here's the Woman Warrior piece by Maxine Hong Kingston. Eudora Welty. Another Keeping Up with Technology, a little timeline. The bicycle has become a... Sorry?
I'm just going to say, may I point out that Eudora Welty once worked at the book review?
Oh, wow.
For a brief period of time. She worked at the book review during World War II.
Interesting. Another little timeline piece, Keeping Up with Technology. Again, only in the print section. The bicycle has become a force in latter-day letters. It was Mark Twain that first seized upon the dramatic possibilities of wheeling, 1898. The motor car or the automobile, as one pleases, will probably take the place of the horse in fiction for a little while. 1904, just a little while. 1905, everyone knows what a boon the automobile has been to the comic papers, but perhaps you do not know what a fine stage property it makes in detective stories, where new tricks are always needed in order to get the required thrills and shivers. And then 1911, within the last few days, I have been asking a number of my friends among the publishers what in their view is likely to be the next new school in fiction. They agree in answering that The Flying Machine is probably the next text on which the O to be popular novelists will concentrate.
The Flying Machine.
Right? Some great illustrations, great pieces, interview with Gore Vidal, a piece on writing science fiction, an essay by Kurt Vonnegut, just incredible. Persepolis, Sister Carrie. And then Should We Have War Crime Trials, a piece by Neil Sheehan, and a list of books on this essay, listed in this essay.
Yeah, let's pause on this for a second. So this appeared in the book review March 28th, 1971. Sheehan, who died earlier this year, gave an interview to the Times in 2015, only to be published after his death, in which he talked about Daniel Ellsberg and acquiring the Pentagon Papers. So we know that right when this book review appeared, he was in the process of, he had seen the papers. He was in the process of copying them, whatever. So it's kind of remarkable. I mean, look at the books that he read for this. It looks like 30 some books. He must have been working on this for 6 or 8 months before it actually appeared. This is a scathing indictment of the U.S. government. I've looked online to look for reception to it. I've had trouble finding that. I think the Pentagon Papers, press sort of overshadows that. But this is it's long. It's maybe 7,000 words long, but it is so worth your time to read.
And I will note that we did have Hedrick Smith. We did 2 shows on the Pentagon Papers. Linda Amster first, and then Hedrick Smith on the 50th anniversary of the Pentagon Papers earlier this year. Carla Baranakis, who put us in touch with you, was able to get those 2 guests, which were incredible. I want to flip through the rest of this. Here, I didn't realize it kept going. So his piece is actually...
It's very long, and I debated including it, but I must tell you, I think it might be the most important piece that's ever run in the book review.
Absolutely. That list of books actually continued on this next page.
Yeah.
And it continues still. It's even longer than I could have imagined. It doesn't end till here. So almost, 6 pages worth. Again, on the number of words, are we talking 3,000 words or so? 2,000?
Oh, no, I think you're talking 7,000, between 6
Even 7,000. Wow.
It's long. And it is the only place where we actually included photos. I wanted to make this stand out in a different way. It's different in tone from everything else in the issue. it's different from anything else the book review is published before or after.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to give it some heft.
And this picture, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara on the front lines in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
An Air Force jet sprays defoliants, otherwise also known as napalm, over South Vietnam in 1966. I know it's hard for folks to see the picture there. Here, President Johnson visits troops in South Vietnam in 66. Civilians rounded up to be killed by the U.S. Army in the My Lai massacre, 1968. That's not a picture that I am familiar with. It's not the more classic picture of the one Viet Cong soldier being assassinated with a gun to his head, but still very powerful, of course. So thank you for pointing that out, Tina. Absolutely. The last two pieces, when celebrated authors wrote children's books. This is Gertrude Stein, James Thurber, Langston Hughes, William Faulkner, and Graham Greene. Would not have thought of them as children's book authors. This last piece I think is really interesting in terms of, is it the last? No, we still have more. The last piece, the first bestseller list. So going back to 1896 in its third issue. Is when they first started talking about bestseller lists. And this chart, I don't know if it's from that period or not, but what's interesting is that it looked at the best-selling books in about 12 different cities. So for folks, you can see it online. I can actually pull it up to make it a little easier to see for folks. So give me one moment to do that. Let's see here.
Yeah, this is from 1942. This is like, it's not the first. I mean, the book review's been trying to track bestsellers since day one, but
sure.
The current bestseller list, of course, which tracks sales from all over the country, sort of has its roots in this 1942 list. Like, here's where we started collecting data from bookstores across the country. For the first few decades of the book review, I mean, it was hard to track sales because publishers didn't release sales figures. So the book review resorted to doing things like looking at what was going back for additional printings, for example. That meant a book was selling well. And it would send reporters to bookstores. What's selling well at your store? So they didn't have access to numbers. So here in 1942 is where you see the first list that really reflects access to numbers from stores.
And this is a little bit of a bigger picture. You don't get the full view of it in terms of the graphic is cut off online a little bit, but the columns are names of cities, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, etc. And then you have books going down the left and a little number indicating their placement in that market, which I thought was one thing I thought was interesting. And Now Tomorrow by Rachel Field was 1 and 2 in almost all the markets, number 5 in Baltimore, 3 in Cleveland, but didn't even make the top 5 in New Orleans or San Francisco, which is really interesting. Those are the 2 blank squares that you see on the screen. So that is interesting. And then the next piece that I thought was really great is the New York Times covers over the years. So this is the last 2 pages of the print edition, decade by decade. Here's how the book review evolved. So you can see this, it's featured in the print section. But again, I think it might be easier. I will see if I can pull it up online to show people. Let's see here.
I do think when you look at the print page like this, you see how the size of it changed over the years. You
do see the size, absolutely. And it's more of that broadsheet down to the almost square that we see today. And I know that earlier when you looked at the Bob Dylan cover, the change from 2004 to 2015. Here's a closer look for folks if they want, if folks want.
One thing that's not reflected here is that for a brief, very brief period of time around 1920, the book review merged with the Sunday New York Times Magazine.
Interesting.
It was a very unhappy marriage. It ended, you know, I think it went on for less than 2 years. But so when you look back in the archives, it's a funny hybrid to look at.
Absolutely. Here is the evolution of the cover as you had it.
Can you go back up a little bit to the second
Sure.
one? So
The very second, sure.
The very second one, not that one, this one. So here at the top, like there's some of the ornateness, like that you sort of see reflected in the cover of this issue today. Do you know what I mean? The curly cues and the squiggles and all those things. There was a lot of experimenting with the logo at the very beginning.
Yeah, let's see if we can make that even bigger, just a little bit bigger for folks to see. So that's really, really interesting. And I just wanted to check in. I know it's 10 o'clock Eastern time. The time flew by. Tina, if you have just a few more minutes, I know that we want to wrap things up. But we are at the end of the print section, luckily. So we did accomplish that goal. So I'm happy to say that. But what I wanted to do is to make sure that we also give a little bit of attention to the book that is coming out next week. So I will pull that on screen as well. You have a history of the book review coming out on November 2nd.
Right.
And how does the book review special section compare with the book itself?
The book review special section is just sort of a taste of what's in the book itself. I mean, the book itself, here I can actually hold it up, is huge.
Oh, good.
It's
well, hold it up again. We'll put you back on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah. And so it's literally got dozens of pieces in it. It's amplified with, I mean, we run old ads, old jackets. The photography is stunning. Both we really mined our own archives for photography. The Times used to have a photo studio and would photograph people it was covering. So we had a photo researcher just dive into our photo archives at the morgue and go through photos and look. So it's very much a coffee table book. It's very much a visual book, but it has everything: letters to the editor, op-eds. We were very fond of op-eds for a while. Like I said, old ads. I'm just trying to see if there's a page I can show you it's just hard to even. I don't know if you can see this. We reproduced a lot of old actual pages of the book review. Oops, sorry,
Wow.
get that straight. Like here, for example, when after Sarah Bernhardt died, and her library went to auction, we went and photographed the dedication pages of all the books with their inscriptions from famous authors to her. So there's a lot of stuff like that in the book.
That is great. I also want to show the, in addition to the book, we want to make sure that people knew about submissions that you want from readers. You want help choosing the best book. Now, that's the best book ever, right? In the history of books?
No, the best book of the last 125 years.
The last 125, okay. So help us choose the best book.
I got the idea for this when the book review turned 100. They did a version of this, but they only surveyed critics and scholars, and that book, the book they chose, was Beloved by Toni Morrison. But as I spent time in the archives, I realized that the book review used to ask this question of its readers all the time. What's the best poem? What's the best short story? What's the best novel you've ever read? In the first 25 years of the book review, there was a lot of that. So it's interesting. We're getting a lot of great answers from folks who are really nominating the books that have had the most impact and meaning in their lives personally, and I love that. We're going to take nominations here until the end of October, and then we'll have a list of 20 finalists up to vote next month. And it's really a constantly fluctuating list, so I'm
Sure.
Not entirely sure what's going to end up on it.
And Paula has shared a link to this page in Facebook and LinkedIn, so people can send in their own submissions. The final thing I wanted to share with folks is the event on Monday, tomorrow, for Times subscribers. You have a celebration, a Times event, a live stream celebration of the book review. So let's take a look at that real quickly, and then we will wrap up our time with you. So let's see if I can pull that up really quickly. There we go. So tell us about this event coming up on Monday.
So this event will be a thumbnail history of the book review. We have people reading some of our most famous and infamous reviews and letters. We've got a trivia quiz for readers and watchers where we've been playing trivia games at the book review during the pandemic, and we've been mining our archive and stumping one another on these quizzes. And now we're going to bring the quiz, to people outside the book review.
Great.
It should be.
And Daniel Day Kim is hosting the event. The headliner.
I'm going to host it, but he's going to read at least one of the reviews in question.
Got it. So it's part of the year-long exploration. Actor Daniel Day Kim and other special guests will bring to life the original reviews, and you and your colleagues are going to share some of your favorite letters, among other things. But you'll be hosting the event. That's good to know. Thank you for that clarification. For subscribers only. So if you're a subscriber to the Times, I certainly encourage you to RSVP and watch the show. So thank you very much, Tina. We want to make a few quick announcements about next week's show and to thank our staff, etc. If you can hang on for just a few more minutes, we'd love to have you come back when we're done to offer a final word and maybe offer a pro tip for writers, if you can. So we'll be right back with Tina Jordan. Again, my name is Neil Parekh, and this has been an incredible show. Thank you very much for hanging with us. I know we're a little bit over time, but there was so much great content to show for this week's edition. Next week, Maureen O'Donnell will be joining us. She's the obituary writer at the Chicago Sun-Times and a past president of the Society of Professional Obituary Writers. She will be our guest. Sri will be back. And we'll definitely, it's another one in our series of interviews with obituary writers. We've had Neil Genslinger and Amy Pandani, Margalit Fox, among others. So we're certainly looking forward to that. Another shout out to our team, Paula Kiger, Julia Weeks, Steve Taylor, Carla Barnakis. Thank you for all the work that you do to make this show a success. And as we're thinking about Carla Barnakis, I want to give a shout out to the Local Connection newsletter put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. Each week, the Local Connection newsletter offers up story ideas and pro tips for journalists. And best of all, it's free. So you can subscribe at bit.ly/local connection. bit.ly/local news tips. bit.ly/local news tips. And with that, I'm going to bring back Tina Jordan for a few concluding remarks. Again, Tina, thank you so much for joining us for this incredible special edition, this deep dive into the book review. Really was a treat for our readers, for me personally. I know Sri is sorry that he couldn't join us today, but we will give him a pass. He is celebrating his 22nd wedding anniversary, and he said how much he really wished he could have made it this week. But thank you so much. A final thought on thinking about the 125 years and maybe looking forward as well.
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on and letting me natter on about this deep dive into the archives. I think I came away from it myself, having learned a great deal, having been pleasantly surprised by a lot that I found, and it's made me understand more than ever that the place of the book review is it's about bringing ideas to people, and like that is its legacy, and that is what it will continue to do. Like that's what I feel strongly about.
Thank you so much, Tina. Really appreciate it. I want to just share some of the quick comments that we had. We started off, I mentioned earlier, Therese saying thank you for the show, for the literary hangout, as she called it. And we had Miriam saying wonderful show. Patricia Freudenberg, wow, amazing history. Thank you to the New York Times Book Review. Thank you every week. I will say it's one of the few sections that I take back to my bedside table Sunday morning to read through over the next few days, because I really do like to dig in. I like reading the history. I particularly like the nonfiction, and I love learning about the world through the book review. Let's see who other comments that came in. Sunny Slaughter, thank you for such an insightful journey. Congratulations to you and your team. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, it does take a team to put out this kind of work over the course of the year. Sunny's also thanking the production team for putting on another great episode. Deborah Bernick has a suggestion in terms of the voting. It may be too late to do this, but ranked choice voting. It worked fairly well in New York, as long as you do better than the Board of Elections in terms of counting votes and posting the results. I think that might work. Rose Horowitz, a wonderful, insightful show. Thank you. And Jess Esch, again, this was great. Thank you all. Let's see who else. Anita, thank you to everyone who made this possible. Ron Thomas, great learning sessions as always. It's his, he calls it a Sunday morning tweet. He's in Dubai. He always makes it a point to log in to watch whatever we do, whoever the guest is. Jonathan Borstein gives you a 5-star review, so that's pretty good. David K. Johnston as well, giving us a thumbs up. Thank you very much, sir. Very appreciated. Emily Silverman, Miriam Berkeley. She's finally connecting a face to your name, so that's great. Brian, Flavored Living, great show. Thank you. Fantastic show from my mom and a number of other people wishing Sri a happy anniversary. So with that, Tina, again, thank you so much for joining us. For people who are watching, as soon as the show is over, just moments after the show is over, you'll be able to watch it again on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or on our website, on YouTube, wherever you might be watching. Facebook takes a few moments to reset in case you joined us halfway through. Our guest, of course, was Tina Jordan, Deputy Editor of the New York Times Book Review. And we spent the morning celebrating the 125th anniversary of the New York Times Book Review. Anita gets the last comment. This is the section she reads first. So again, thank you so much, Tina. Really appreciate it. And congratulations to your entire team for an incredible both year-long celebration, everything you have online, and also today's section, the event, the book. It goes on and on.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about the book review, and I really appreciate this time that we've had.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.